Now, the National Energy Regulator of South Africa has published a consultation document outlining a revised load shedding plan which allows for stage 6 power outages. This document details load reduction practices, system restoration, and critical load and essential load requirements during emergencies. Let's try and unpack this document for you, get you a sense of how it might affect you by bringing in the chair of the Management Committee of the National Rationalised Specifications Associations of South Africa. He also happens to be the former Eskom and City Power executive. Vally Padayachee is our guest in studio this Friday morning. Great to see you as always, sir. Thanks very much indeed for popping by.
Good morning, Ayanda, and a very good morning to your viewers as well, and thank you for having me back here.
Sure. I mean, let's begin by just outlining the importance of this document as a start. I mean, it's described as a code of practices for a number of things, including what I've just outlined. Why is it important?
In very simple terms, as a one-liner, it's a document. Once it's approved by NERSA, in this case edition 3, it's a document that would legally regulate load shedding. And if you make the assumption, not make the assumption, if you accept that load shedding is done by the utilities vis-a-vis the Eskom and the municipalities, then this document, once approved by NERSA, which would give it its legal and compliance mandate as per the ERA and NERSA Act, then it makes it compulsory, a license condition for the utilities, Eskom and the municipalities to comply with it. But having said that, and you may have seen this in the document, it does not subrogate the functions of the national system operator, national control. In other words, it's a tool to assist them in regulating and executing load shedding, but in the case of a real-time emergency, when the proverbial hits a fan, then the system operator has a prerogative to take whatever action necessary to protect the grid and prevent it from going into a blackout.
Right, okay. I suppose with that in mind, the question to ask is what kind of legislative gaps is it trying to fill? I mean, if you speak about regulating load shedding, can we then presume that at the moment there isn't any kind of mechanism to do that?
Well, let me answer that from a different point of view. As an NRS association, to our very structures, work groups, we actually do the hard work. So as engineers, mainly engineers, we compile that document using technical and engineering sort of standards and practices, etc. And we consult as wide as possible, and then we compile that document. But we don't have any legislative teeth. In other words, once a document is approved, which we did as the Management Committee at the end of June, it's still a voluntary document, but it can be adopted by the utilities. So to give it that legal status, it's only in NERSA and SABS, but in this case it's NERSA, through the Electricity Regulation Act as amended, as a legal mandate. And as an NRS, we prefer that document to be legally mandated so that there's no ifs and buts when there's a state of emergency, so that there's compliance. And I say that with respect to all the utilities, there's compliance. Because our business as the NRS is to protect the national grid from going into a blackout and a collapse.
But I mean, it's an important point to kind of emphasize. We have seen, even just as recently as this year, municipalities that are accused of not, for instance, following the load shedding schedule, and that potentially puts the grid's integrity into jeopardy, especially because we're told load shedding fundamentally is to prevent a grid collapse. But let's speak a bit more.
But maybe, just not to forget that point, because it's important to know that it's not totally the fault of municipalities when they don't do that. It's because with the higher levels of load shedding, and I don't want to get too technical, and as you get to higher levels, it becomes onerous on especially municipalities to execute load shedding instruction. Bearing in mind it's an instantaneous instruction, because as you get to higher stages of load shedding, say beyond stage 4, in technical terms, you need to switch off more substations. And you can either do that with SCADA, which is remote, or you're going to do it manually.
Right.
And to do it manually, you need highly skilled electricians, not the normal ones, to do that. And you don't have too many of those, and you need time. So some of the municipalities were caught wanting, not due to their fault. But Edition 3, and I'm glad you asked that question, or you made the comment. Edition 3, we've taken that into consideration. So you'll find that when we get to stages 5 and above, the times between load shedding stages, the intervals are increased so that it gives these electricians time to literally go physically to the different substations and what we call do the switching.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean the time is increased? Because, I mean, as you've mentioned, we've lived in a context where, for instance, stage 6 load shedding is implemented with immediate effect. In what ways does this document potentially curtail that?
Well, what it means is that because if you, as you said, if the municipalities or utilities don't execute an instruction for whatever reason, then the worst case scenario is that you can get into a blackout and collapse the grid.
Right.
And so that imperative or requirement is necessary, say, from stage 5 and above. So to prevent that situation from happening, we've given, as I said, those electricians and those municipalities a little more time to go and execute the load shedding instruction from stages 5 and above, so that we don't get into a situation where we risk the grid from collapsing.
Right. That said, though, up to this point, I think many South Africans understood load shedding to go up to stage 8, potentially. This document takes us all the way to stage 16.
In the unlikely event of stage 16, let me make that statement.
We've been hearing about the unlikely event of stage 8 for years.
Right.
So I wonder what his introduction of stage 16 suggests.
Okay. I'm glad you asked the question. It's an important question that I think the public and the media needs to understand. Let me take a quick step back. So if you look at Edition 1, which got approved in 2010, it went up to stage 4. Because we said in the unlikely event of stage 4, because at the time, from 2008, we were load shedding up to stage 2.
Right.
And then, of course, we went beyond, beyond stage 2. So in 2017, as an NRS, we started, we realized that we could get beyond stage 4. So we said in the unlikely event, let's double that. And we went to stage 8. Right? And of course, now we're sitting, well, we went through a coldish winter at stage 6, and as an NRS, we still can't give you guarantees because of the state of the generation assets. It's still, well, if you look at the AF, it's still 60%, that we can't go beyond stage 6 or beyond stage 8. So what we've done, maybe just a year and a half ago, as a responsible, prudent organization, we said, let's amend and then reflect the current landscape with the crisis situation, etc. But more importantly, Ayanda, with Edition 2, we went up to stage 8. So if we went beyond stage 8, stage 9 and stage 10, then very simply, the good people at System Control, National Control, the Municipal Control Centers, there's about 800 of them that man the grid and doing a fantastic job, would have gone into what we call a emergency contingency mode, right? And they're extremely qualified to do that. But they're humans. So the propensity of making an error in that mode is always there.
Right.
So what we've done as an NRS, to mitigate that, we've removed, very simple terms, the contingency emergency regime, right? And how did we do that? We've taken, very simply, we've taken the entire load of the country, on average, which was about 32 gigawatt hours, not 32 gigawatts,
right,
which is 32,000 megawatts, and in our modeling and engineering, equated that to a stage 16, right? And so that's why we say it's in the unlikely event we'll get to stage 16, let alone, I don't think we'll even get to stage 13, 14, 15, and 16, but we could get to 9, 10, and 11, and so on. But as a prudent organization, as a responsible organization, we said, let's prevent for the unintended consequences, right? Because remember, it's a tool. It's like 911. So when these good people in system operation, the national control and the municipal control centers are faced with this emergency in real time, right, then at least they've got a tool that would substantiate and complement their current competencies to prevent that. So we've mitigated risk almost 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Yeah.
Sure. So, I get that. And I wonder, so far, we understand each stage of load shedding to essentially account for about 1,000 megawatts, right? But if you think about a stage 16 accounting for essentially 32,000 megawatts, it suggests to us that at some stage the rules change.
No, let me say this categorically in the public media at the moment. That 1,000 megawatts was and I don't talk on behalf of Eskom, but Eskom is a part of NRS, so we talk collectively. So from an NRS perspective, although Eskom had, in the initial stages of this crisis situation, had indicated it's 1,000 megawatts per stage. But I can tell you conclusively, they never used that measure in their load shedding.
Really?
Because it varies. And it could have varied from 800 megawatts, 900, 1,000 megawatts, 1,100, and 1,200. And that's why it caused that confusion, if you recall, between stage 6 and stage 8. Now, in this new edition, to mitigate that, we've come up with what we call an innovative way of load shedding, and a very simple way and a less confusing. And very simply what we've done is that we've said that each stage, and you may have seen it in the document, that document there, Annex B, it's 5% per stage, right? So instead of going
5% of what?
5%, and the formula is, okay, let me quickly talk about that. So it's 5% of what they would do in national control. They would forecast a demand at every hour of the day, right? Every time of the day. So let's take stage 1, right? So they would forecast the demand, say, middle of winter, and it's the peaking demand. And let's say that's 30,000 megawatts, right? Then they would add in what we call the reserve margin, plus or minus, say, about 2,500 megawatts. So if you add that in, right, then they would subtract the curtailment load, which is about 7,500 megawatts. And the curtailment load, you know, comes from the key customers, right? And then they would divide that from that mechanistic result, and they would get a percentage. So if that percentage, right, is 5% and less, then they would declare stage 1.
Okay.
If that gap is 10%, they would declare it's stage 2, and so on. Right up to stage 16, unlikely event, I repeat, it would be 80%. But bear in mind that from a customer experience point of view, it does not affect them at all. It actually could make it better, because that gap, as I say, it could be even less. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
And then I just need to make this point. At the licensee level, what we've done in edition 3, we've divided the entire load shedding into 16 blocks, right? And very simply, each block is one stage. So if you're load shedding stage 1, the system operator would issue an instruction, instantaneous instruction, to load shed to all the licensees, all the municipalities, and they would shed one block, right? If it's stage 2, it's 2 blocks, and each block, even in the licensees, is between 5% and 6.25%. So mechanistically and engineering-wise, it's equal.
Right.
So if you do the sums, the customers and the end users will not be worse off. So they wouldn't see any more aggro than it. And I would argue that they could see it even better. But this new innovative way of load shedding gives us as an opportunity, us meaning system operation, national control, the muni control, a easier way, a less convoluted way of implementing load shedding in an emergency situation.
Right. And I think that's probably worth emphasizing. This document helps us better manage load shedding and hopefully better protect the grid in the context of any kind of emergency.
In fact, I would argue, this methodology, I would argue, it's one of the most innovative ways of load shedding globally. I know I'm making a bold statement, but we've done so much of work on this. We've got experiences from 2010. So, arguably, it comes with inconveniences, but load shedding is still an excellent tool, one of the best management tools to prevent a blackout. Because you don't want to get into a blackout, and we haven't been. South Africa is good.
Right.
We haven't been there for over 100 years. We are one of the few countries in the world, and that's because of the good people in national control and system operation and the Munich control rooms. So we haven't gone into that situation. We don't want to get in there. And the intent of this is not to hide behind the back of making it difficult for customers. We balance the protection of the grid as an NRS and the aggro to the customers. And but our business is to protect the grid.
Absolutely. All right. Hopefully that's loud and clear. Thanks very much indeed for coming through.
Can I make one more comment just before? One more quick comment. I just want to take this opportunity of thanking the leadership of the National Energy Regulator of South Africa for acceding to our request to give the processing of this document to make it a legal, to give it legal status, to give it top priority, because NERSA at the moment is inundated with the crisis situation, the requirements. But I'm glad that we made the request, and I did it as the chair of the NRS, and I'm glad that the CEO and the full-time energy regulator both acceded to the request, and they're giving it top priority. So we want to compliment NERSA for that.
Loud and clear. Vally Padayachee, thanks very much indeed for coming through. The chair of the NRS, as you've heard, former Eskom and City Power executive as well. There is a lot to be said about this document, and hopefully we'll be able to continue following the story, breaking down for you some of the technicalities and get you a sense of why it matters. Once again, Vally Padayachee, thanks for coming through.
Thank you very much, and my pleasure.
All right.